I'm Femi OK and you're watching the stream. Today we're going to take a look at the movement to abolish the death penalty in the United States of America. You can be part of this conversation as well. You can weigh in the YouTube comments and be part of today's show.
Growing up, my mom told me, 2 wrongs don't make a right. My faith teaches me that we shouldn't return evil for evil. And that's exactly what the death penalty does. People are capable of terrible things, but we can honor the victims without creating more victims. We don't rape people who rape to show that rape is wrong. And we don't need to kill to try to show that killing is wrong. The death penalty just mirrors the evil rather than healing the wounds of it. Violence is the disease, not the cure. It's time to end the death penalty in America.
A moral argument there for doing away with the death penalty in the United States. You're about to hear many more arguments. So we have Sandra, we have Robert, we have Herman. They're all repeal advocates. Welcome to the stream. Sandra, explain what you do, who you are for our international audience.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sandra Babcock. I have defended people around the world who are facing the death penalty in Africa as well as in the United States. And I am also a professor who teaches students about capital punishment, and I run a center on the death penalty worldwide. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you. Hello, Robert. Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Thank you for having me. I'm Robert Dunham. I'm the Executive Director of the Death Penalty Information Center. DPIC doesn't take a position for or against the death penalty, but we're very critical of the way in which it's been administered. I represented people on Pennsylvania's death row for 25 years before joining DPIC 5 years ago.
Good to have you. Thanks, Robert, for making time for the stream. And Herman, you are so relevant to today's conversation. Introduce yourself and tell our audience why you're relevant.
My name is Herman Lindsey. I am Florida's 23rd Death Row exoneree. I'm also the secretary of the board of Witness to Innocence. I like to advocate and express my story to tell people the dangers of having the death penalty here, and I'm happy to be here today.
It's really good to have you. Herman, I know you said before that you will never forget hearing the judge's sentence. Would you mind repeating the words that he told you?
On the day I was sentenced, I was in a state, a bad state, like a numb state, because I couldn't understand how I was found guilty of a crime I didn't commit. And to hear the judge's word that I will never forget is that here it says, we the people of the state of Florida hereby sentence you to die by lethal injection. Those words stuck to me and I emotionally broke down inside.
Sandra, in 2021, why does the United States of America have the death penalty?
You know, the death penalty really is a relic of an earlier age. And the United States continues to apply it because our politicians don't have the will to do what is necessary. And that is to recognize that the death penalty serves no penological purpose. Until our elected politicians step up to the plate and exercise their moral leadership and their political leadership to abolish the death penalty, we are going to be stuck with this system that is extremely costly, that is administered in a way that is racially biased, that singles out the most marginalized members of our society for a punishment that is imposed in an extraordinarily arbitrary way.
Robert, I'm just thinking the death penalty is seen as the ultimate penalty. This is what will keep society in place. It will keep order. It will stop serious crime. What are the stats that we should know about this? What's the reality?
Well, the reality is that that's just not true. We did a recent study. We looked at 31 years of FBI data, the Federal Bureau of Investigation data, on murders in the United States and in murders of police officers. Because if the death penalty does reduce murders, then that's a powerful reason to have it. And if it does make police safer, that's a reason also to have it in at least that narrow category of cases. What we found was that over this 31-year period, murder rates were consistently higher in states that had the death penalty than in states that didn't. Police officers were killed at a higher rate in states with the death penalty than states that didn't have it. And when murder rates changed, when they went up or they went down across the country, they went up approximately the same whether a state had the death penalty, didn't have the death penalty, or had recently done away with the death penalty. So what it comes down to is the death penalty does not make America safer. And that's also the fact anywhere in the world where there's capital punishment. It does not serve to make the public safer.
I want to play a clip, Herman, from your organisation, Witness to Innocence. Can you explain briefly what it is, who makes up the organisation, and then I'm going to play somebody's story, because these two things connect really well together.
If I may, I want to comment on what
Sure,
they just
go ahead.
said a little bit.
Please.
The death penalty is not something that put fears in the heart of Americans to prevent them from committing a crime. In fact, when I was on death row, I learned that many of the defendants there didn't even know anything about the death penalty. They don't know anything about the death penalty until they was actually facing the death penalty. And majority of the crimes is done at a spur of a moment or a time of passion or through emotion or anger. It doesn't give them time to think about the death penalty. So no, I don't think that the death penalty played any part of preventing anyone from committing a crime.
Herman, I'm going to show the audience the Twitter page for Witness to Innocence. This is a very unusual organisation. WTI is the nation's only organisation dedicated to empowering exonerated death row survivors to be the most effective voice in the fight for abolition. Herman is on the board of that organisation. And the organisation creates videos, it creates awareness and shares stories to explain why we shouldn't have a death penalty in the United States. This is Ray's story. Have a look.
I didn't go in at 18 years old. I didn't go in as a 20-year-old kid. I didn't go in coming from a broken family or a difficult childhood. I did almost 7 years in the military. I was working for the post office at the time of my arrest, and I had a personal pride in myself of who I was and what I accomplished. When I was in prison, the only people who seemed to care about me was my family. People knew me because everybody else thought I was a murderer, and so I deserved death. That's kind of the way our justice system works. We convict somebody of something, and people say, oh, good, kill him, and they don't want to know any of the details, the facts, or even if he is guilty. And thankfully, my family and friends didn't give up and give in, and that gave me the strength to keep going. My family was able to get that DNA testing. That's when the doors opened up for me with a match to a man that lived right down the road from the murder.
See, Sandra and Herman, this is the horror of the death penalty. What if you make a mistake beyond the moral argument, beyond aren't we more civilized than killing somebody, but the mistake part of it, Sandra, why isn't that a deep enough argument to actually just get rid of the death penalty instantly?
Well, I think that many people are blinded to the reality of the death penalty. As Herman so aptly put it, we recoil from descriptions of violent crime. We recoil from the very tragic stories of people who are on death row. But what we know, and people who are who take the time to become educated about the death penalty, they realize that the people on death row are often either wrongly convicted or wrongly sentenced because they are not, as mythology would have it, deviant, evil, sadistic killers. These are people who are among the most vulnerable of our society. They are profoundly mentally ill. They are brain damaged. They are people like Lisa Montgomery, who was raped, gang raped. She was subjected to years of incest and rape by her stepfather. She was sex trafficked as a young woman by her mother. She continued to be raped and beaten in her marriage. And this is a woman who, as a result of that sexual violence that she experienced, was broken. She was mentally broken. She was delusional and dissociative at the time of the crime. She committed that crime. She was guilty of the crime. But the issue in her case was, did she deserve to die for that crime? And the jury who sentenced her to death never knew about the scope of the violence that she had endured and its effect on her mental health. So that's what we need to focus on with the death penalty as well, is this mythology that exists around who it is that is singled out for this ultimate punishment.
Robert, the reason why this movement against the death penalty is it's got, I would say, new energy, maybe some new optimism, is because President Biden says that he wants to do away with the death penalty. The Stream contacted the White House in the last few days. Have a look here. We asked for a particular statement. What are you doing right now for the Biden-Harris administration? And they pointed us to their websites. It didn't look like they were doing much right now, but they do talk about how many individuals have been sentenced to death since 1973, and Biden will work to pass legislation to eliminate the death penalty at the federal level and incentivize states to follow the federal government's example. These individuals should instead serve life sentences without probation or parole. How big a deal is this, Robert?
Well, it remains to be seen how big a deal it is. Joe Biden will become, if he moves to abolish the federal death penalty, he will become the first U.S. president in history to have actively opposed capital punishment. And that's a big deal. It's also extremely important as a symbolic gesture if he imposes a moratorium on executions. But that is not enough. We had a practical moratorium on executions when Barack Obama was president. They did not carry out any executions, but during that time, the federal government continued to prosecute capital cases, continued to defend capital cases on appeal. And so the cases continued to move through. And when President Obama left office, he had the opportunity to commute death sentences of people who were on federal death row. And he only issued 2 commutations. That created the circumstance in which a president like Donald Trump was able to execute more people in 6 months than we'd ever seen before in the history of the federal government's use of civilian execution. So it's a big deal if the president comes through. And that remains to be seen what will happen, because when we looked at the repeal efforts of the death penalty at the state level, the successes have occurred when there's been bipartisan support. When a repeal effort is considered to be political and partisan, it hasn't succeeded. So President Biden has to somehow reach across the aisle to gain support from some of the Republican members of Congress if abolition is going to happen. And he also has a lot of other things that he needs to work on right now, the COVID situation here. So we have to give him a little bit of time before he gets along to the death penalty.
Probably why they had nothing other than look at our website, that they weren't ready to tackle that particular issue yet. But
and they also, their attorney general hasn't even been confirmed by the Senate yet. So he's got to get his team in place before he's able to move forward with his criminal reform agenda.
You guests are inspiring a lot of conversation on YouTube. I want to share some of the thoughts with you, Sandra and Herman. Andy Lovett says, I have a brother and sister who were murdered, and I am against the death penalty. Much cheaper to keep them behind the bars for the rest of their lives than to risk killing an innocent person. Herman, quick response to that one.
I do agree with her. And what most people don't understand is that the death penalty brings no justice to either side. is create victims on both sides. And my quick response to that is that the death penalty, if the death penalty to me is really, if it was to be imposed, is really the easy way out, because anyone that commits one of those crimes, they can just waive their appeals and be executed. Just say hypothetically, they say, "Oh God, forgive me," and I repent for my sins, and they feel they're gonna go away. They don't have to think about the consequences or suffer any of the mental issue, the mental trauma of what they've for what they have done.
Yeah. Herman, can I ask you this then? This is from Ravan, also on YouTube. The death penalty should not be abused, only execute for the worst of crimes. What would be your pushback to that?
What would be considered the worst of crime? Most of the problems is that, and this is why we got a lot of wrongful convictions, is the way society has not stepped up and the way of thinking. Because in society, they thinks that, okay, for instance, we'll use example, if a child was involved in the case, or an elderly person was involved in the case of being murdered, the society will automatically think and look at the defendant as he's the ones that done it, and that increases the chances of convicting the wrongful person. So, what is the worst of the worst crime? Because you're thinking a certain way in society about a certain crime, and it makes it difficult to even preside justice to say what is the worst of the worst.
I'm going to bring up Karina Barrett Lane. She is a law professor, Sandra, and she feels that now is the moment for the death penalty to be abolished. Have a listen and then come off the back of her. Go ahead.
My hope is that the Biden administration will put the pause on federal executions and then end the death penalty at the federal level altogether. Having studied this issue for nearly 15 years, I can tell you that the death penalty is deeply flawed for reasons that good people on both sides of the aisle would rightly denounce. One of those reasons is that the death penalty is racist. There have been a number of studies on this issue, and they all show the impact of race on the administration of the death penalty across the United States, no matter what the study, no matter what the analytic technique or the data set. So either Black Lives Matter when actual lives are at stake, or they don't. It's really just that simple.
You know, I think she's right. And there is a reason why the great majority of the world's countries have abolished the death penalty. And, you know, many of those countries are in places we wouldn't expect. Of course, Europe and Latin America have abolished the death penalty almost entirely, but also most African countries have abolished the death penalty, either in practice or as a matter of law. And that is because you can't tinker with the death penalty and make it perfect. In response to that one question, you know, why don't we just reserve the death penalty for those people who are really, really, really bad, where the evidence is incontrovertible? But that gets back to this mythology that I mentioned before, and that Herman also pointed out, which is that those cases don't exist. There is never a system where you can eliminate the possibility of human error. And moreover, when we look at those terrible crimes, those are precisely the crimes where the risk of error is the greatest, because people get blinders. When you have people who commit violent crimes, there is such a overwhelming pressure to convict someone, to put someone away, that they cut corners and they ignore exculpatory evidence. We call this the death penalty exception to the rule of law. It has a warping effect on the entire criminal legal system. There is simply no way to make that perfect.
I want to show a map here on my laptop. The states in the United States that have capital punishment, the death penalty, are in blue. The states with capital punishment are in green. You see the difference there between the blue and the green. How do you turn the entire United States blue, Robert?
Well, I don't think we're going to turn the entire United States blue, but it is getting bluer and bluer for your map. In fact, there are 28 states that still have the death penalty, but 22 have gotten rid of it. And among the states that do have it, California and Pennsylvania account for almost 1/3 of the country's death row, and governors in those states have imposed moratoria on executions. We've had the last 2 years record low numbers of new death sentences imposed. We're near all-time lows in the number of executions, and the death penalty is disappearing one at a time, state by state. It is likely that we will see another state abolish this year. There'll be votes within the next 2 weeks on that in Virginia. And you can now drive from the tip of Maine to the tip of West Virginia, more than 1,000 miles, without ever entering a state in the union that has capital punishment. Only 1.2% of the counties in the United States account for half of everyone who is on death row. And counties are using it less and less, and counties are electing new prosecutors who want to change the system. So I think that we're going to see at a county level and one at a time at a state level, the death penalty continuing to disappear in the U.S.
But could the president on a federal level just say, and now it ends? Could he get
No, he
enough
can't.
lawmakers to make that law? No,
Well,
it's not
that
possible.
is the question. That is the question. The president doesn't have the power by himself to abolish capital punishment. He does have the power to grant clemency and commute the sentences of everybody who is on death row.
I'm going to play a comment from Tamika. Tamika is a teacher. Tamika is feeling very optimistic about what the president is able to do and able to get lawmakers on board to do it with him. Have a listen.
I hope the Biden administration finally does away with the death penalty in the United States. Look, it doesn't save taxpayers' dollars. It doesn't deter crime. It doesn't bring peace to the individuals involved. It's a tool in a criminal justice system that makes money off of Black and brown incarcerated bodies. It was a political tool used by the former president in the last pitiful days of office. Look, it is time to do away with these stains of injustice in our country. It is time to abolish the death penalty.
Yes, there's something I want to share with you, and this is from Stack Cadet on YouTube. And Stack Cadet says, there are too many what ifs or grey areas. I could never be on a jury and vote for the death penalty, even if I thought they were guilty. But isn't it public opinion that really is the battle that either politicians have to feel that their constituents absolutely think it's not reasonable to have the death penalty? Is it just the general public, Herman, that you have to persuade?
The funny thing about that is if you're not sure if you can vote for the death penalty, you can't even be selected for jury. So that is a great flaw. You have to be able to vote for the death penalty to actually be on a death penalty case, period. So that is society. We have to try to adjust that, which there's no way to adjust because the death penalty is supposed to be for the worst of the worst, but the crimes that is committed, the worst of the worst, is actually people with mental issues, which our Constitution is supposed to say we cannot execute. But as much as I hate to say it, as in Lisa Montgomery case, it failed. So, someone being on that jury and having a difficult time, that's not going to work.
I want to share a tweet that Sandra tweeted out, because we've been talking about the death penalty, but we didn't really describe what it might be like. And Sandra posted this. Imagine this: a group of men strapping Lisa down to a gurney, strapping her arms, her legs, her chest. She has been held down by men many times before. She disassociates. They pump her full of poison. Is this justice? That pretty much sums up the conversation we have been having today. I want to thank our guests for being with us. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Herman. If you want to follow their work, you can do very much so online. So Sandra Babcock is here on Twitter. You can also follow the Death Penalty Information Centre, and finally, witness to innocence. And that wraps up our stream show for today. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.